Hi, good morning and good afternoon from wherever you're tuning in. My name is Erica Skolnick, and I'm the Development Director for the American Friends of ALYN Hospital. I'm really very happy to welcome you to another fabulous ALYN with ALYN program. Thank you so much for joining us today to learn more about ALYN Hospital and what makes it so special and unique. ALYN with ALYN is a program created by the American Friends of ALYN Hospital to inform and inspire donors and friends of the hospital. Throughout the series, we look at each department at the hospital and how positively it impacts the ALYN patients and their families. Your support helps provide these services and makes it possible for to improve the lives of the children at ALYN every day. Thank you. Our support, their success. If you'd like to share some feedback about this event or any ideas that might interest you for future events, please email me or call the office directly. We're always interested in your feedback. Now it's my honor to introduce Joanne Bly, the most recent past president and currently vice president of the American Friends of ALYN Hospital, who will introduce our guest speakers. Joanne?
Yes, thank you, Erica. First, I'd like to say, yes, it's been a great 3-year term that I had as president of the American Friends of ALYN Hospital, the board president. And I'm also pleased to announce that Paula Glazier has been voted in as our new president. Paula's great uncle, Dr. Henry Keller, a New York orthopedic surgeon, made Aliyah to Israel in 1932 and was a founder of the ALYN Hospital. Paula has been involved in American Friends of ALYN for over 20 years, and you will be seeing and hearing more from her over the next few months. I'll still be around, but she'll be taking over, as I mentioned. As far as ALYN with ALYN, I'm pleased to welcome all of you to the 8th in our continuing ALYN with ALYN series, where we host distinguished speakers to provide updates on all the initiatives at ALYN Hospital, funded in part by you, our donors. As Erica said, it's our support, their success. And previous ALYN with ALYN series covered topics such as remote therapies, movement analysis in the mobility lab, quality of life for the ALYN patients, speech and language therapy, interviews with nurses, and other interesting topics. If you missed any of the previous ALYN with ALYN series, they are available for viewing from the alynus.org webpage or on YouTube at ALYN Hospital Friends. This seminar will be posted there as well. Today, we'll be joined by Ruth Palmor, Head of Psychological Services, and Estee Spasser, Developmental Psychology Specialist from the hospital. We were speaking before all of you got on, and they've both been involved with ALYN for over 20 years, which should help you realize how dedicated the staff are at the hospital. They will present an overview of the ALYN Hospital Psychology Department, the unique approaches to dealing with early childhood trauma, and the methodologies used to help rehabilitate patients. So please help me welcome Ruti and Estee.
Thank you very much. My name is Ruth Palmor, and I'm the head of the psychology department at ALYN Hospital. I'm a rehabilitation psychologist working at ALYN, as you said, for more than 20 years and still having fun. The main speaker today will be Estee, who luckily for you is an English speaker. So I'll just start and then I'll introduce Estee. But first, I want to say a few words about psychologists at ALYN. We are 12 psychologists. We have 2 students and 3 interns. And some of us work at ALYN for many, many years. So we're colleagues and also friends. We have also therapists through the arts under the management of Palmor. She's a music therapist, and she has a team that includes 6 therapists in music, arts, and even drama and animals. The treatment we give in ALYN It's concerning babies and children and adolescents with a wide range of congenital and acquired conditions. Children that come after accidents or with burns or dealing with TBI, traumatic brain injuries, and also children or adolescents that come with pain syndrome that affects their function. The psychological therapy model is designed for each child according to their needs. And in general, the youngest we see at the playroom. We have play therapy. Estee will speak about it, and other we see by traditional therapy, sitting with each other and speaking. And we also do parents counseling, and we also go and see how the treatment in the room of the physiotherapist or occupational therapist is done, and then think together how we can make the child that have a problem with cooperation can feel more involved in the process of rehabilitation. A part of direct treatment, the psychologists in ALYN are involved in more generate issues. For example, the patient experience to be at the hospital, how is it for him to be hospitalized? Because we know that these situations also can be stressful. אסתי, את יכולה להעביר. Before I pass, before I want Estee to start and showing you, giving the example of the therapy, I wanted to show you two quotes from Viktor Frankl. I know that most of you recognize and know about his logotherapy. This is approach that sees and believes that the human spirit and its ability to face many challenges and even to grow from them. Viktor Frankl said that everything can be taken from man, but one thing, the last of the human freedom to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. Even the tragic and negative aspect of life, such as unavoidable suffering, can be turned into human achievement by the attitude which a man adopts. If we have time, if we can see a short YouTube that can show him speaking in his words, but I think that our treatment here in ALYN is very similar to this thoughts and words, because we see people in suffering, but we see their courage and we see their spirits. And sometimes this is the reason that we have the passion to come every day to work, to deal with suffering. I will introduce Estee. She's a development psychologist. She's a colleague and a friend. She's an excellent professional. And as you will see, she has a warm connection with her patient and their families. And I want to tell you that this year she was chosen as an outstanding employee at ALYN. I hope, Estee, that you won't be angry with me about this introduction, but now the stage is yours.
When we said, Ruthie said earlier that there are 11 rehab psychologists and 1 developmental psychologist. As you can tell, that's me. I feel like I've been given from my colleagues an honorary developmental rehab psychologist of being there for so many years and understanding the processes also. I work with a younger population. Developmental psychologists in Israel are age ranges from 0 to 9 years old. So a lot of the younger children who've been through accidents, who've been through burns, who've been through cancer, all these a very large variety of populations come to me, and we have to see how we can help them. Now, there is some unique challenges of treating trauma in the young child. And I chose this picture from Google. I would like it because he looks terrorized. I mean, he fell on his knees. Looks like he's terrorized. He's not crying, but he needs somebody to come up and help him. He needs a parent to come. And luckily at his age, parents generally have the ability to come up and either to kiss the child or kiss the boo-boo or to put a Band-Aid on it. And life goes on and life is tremendous. And at this age, most times the parents are all powerful. They can do anything. They can solve 95% of the problems of the child. Unfortunately, when we're dealing with trauma with a child who's been burned or who's had cancer or who's been in a car accident and their functionings have changed, the parents are suddenly in the position that they lost their own powerful, all-powerful position because they can't solve this child's problem. A Band-Aid doesn't help, a kiss doesn't help, and they're dealing with difficulty of a change in their position towards the child. And we're also now trying to deal also with the child. It's not an adult who you can sit there and have a discussion with and talk about, what happened or whatever, because we're talking that their cognitive abilities are very different. They're young. They are very much approached to the here and now. What happened today, what happened yesterday, what happened last week is not in their daily, thought process. Their verbal abilities, we're talking, some of the children are nonverbal when they are injured. Some of them, the language is, 3 or 4 year olds level of talking. The memory storage and retrieval until the age of about 3 or 4, memories are stored at a more sensory level rather than at a verbal level. It's pictures, it's positions of the body, it's smells, it's tastes, it's locations. I can give you an example. I also work in early childhood feeding disorders, and we're trying to give a child a new experience there because their feeding experience has been rotten for some reason. If they've had reflux or they've been throwing up nonstop. So we're trying to give them a new learning experience of eating. We change how they're being held. If they were always lying down, we make them sit up. If they were being fed by a bottle, we give them a spoon. We change the texture. We change the taste of the food. And all of these things answer the memory, change the learning experience, and can affect the memories. I also, even the memories from an adult also on certain traumas are physical. I have a friend who flipped over in a car, and every time the car goes on, even till today, the car starts going on its side, she gets very tense because it's the same position she was in when the car flipped. So these are the things that we have to deal with that are special with a child, an early child, a young child. And as written here, the developmental psychology approach is that the young child until about the age of 6 is not considered an entity unto himself and is always related to an parent-child dyad. So the therapy is always with the parent there to be with the child and to help the child go through what they've done. There's some specific challenges of rehab medical trauma. because we're talking about ongoing or complex trauma. A child who was in an accident and then was hospitalized, let's say in one of the other hospitals, you know, the regular hospitals in Israel. So he's got the trauma from the accident. He's got the trauma from all the medical interventions that he's had. And then he comes to us and he continues often or new other surgeries, MRIs, medication. I have a child I'm working with now who was a burn case. And I was asked to start coming into physiotherapy because they're working on massaging the scars. And he was scared to death that they were going to touch the open scars. And it was like, it was reliving all the trauma and all the pain that he was dealing with again and again in the therapy. He's continued to go back to more surgeries and comes back and again has more interventions. So it's a more complex trauma than a child who fell down, broke his leg, and that's it. I mean, it might be scary for a child, but here it's ongoing, and we're working through all this, these ongoing traumas. And we keep working at the same time. A child who's got cancer and is still going back and forth between ALYN and getting chemo and all sorts of other medical interventions. So we're always dealing with new and ongoing things. We're also dealing with physical changes. We have a child who just began to walk and suddenly can't walk. A child who has achieved independence in the bathroom and suddenly has lost this for either if it's just, you know, temporary or permanently. A child who's dealing with pain. A child who used to be able to walk and needs to use a wheelchair or a walker, or has to be catheterized, or has to have splints. The changes in the physical appearance, are we talking about a child who's lost a limb, or a child after a burn case who has scarred his face, his arms, his legs, and has to deal also with how he looks, how the society sees him. This, for an example, this child that I'm working with now with an extreme burn case, is 7-year-old. After he became very comfortable in ALYN, and he was racing around, he's one of the most favorite childs in ALYN because he's a friendly, happy child. And everybody nobody made an issue of the way he looks. And then he started going back home and he started meeting up with people and his family and friends. And he went to school and he came back and he goes, I can't go out. I can't go out because people are looking at me. And we basically had a major crisis with when he went from fully hospitalized to day ambulatory care and going back to school. It was months and months, and he's still not out of the crisis, but it's suddenly he had to come and, you know, deal with, okay, how do I look to other people, and how do I deal with it? Also, we're talking about the length of rehabilitation, and this is for the whole family. Being out of your natural environment for 6 months, a year. We've had kids even longer than that in the hospital. And it's like, okay, we try, the idea of rehab is to get the child back into his natural environment as best as we can. So we start with, you're in the hospital, then they go home for the first weekend. For the first Shabbat, they go home. How is it? We work with the family, we work with the kid. How was it being home? And then we slowly, they go towards ambulatory care, 5 days a week, 4 days a week, 3 days a week, getting them back into their kindergartens, into their educational systems, and helping them make this transition as good as well as possible. The hospitalization also has a major effect in the parents. They're stressed. They're worried about this child. They're worried about the kids at home. There's monetary issues. There's stress of how do you deal with who stays with the kid, who's at home with the other kids. how it works with the couples. We also have seen a lot of the kids don't always understand why they are in rehab. And sometimes you have to deal with, for an example, there was a 10-year-old who I had some contact with, and the physiotherapist came up to me and she goes, "She's not cooperating." I go, "Does she know why she's even here?" She came back and she talked to her the next week. This is an Arab speaker, which makes it a little bit more difficult. And she goes, "Okay," I explained to her what she's doing, what our goals are, and now she's with me. She's working. So it's trying to help them understand this also. I am going to put in parentheses that a year ago, after seeing a lot of the physiotherapists and occupational therapists who speak a decent Arabic, so they can work with the kids and they can tell them, go here, go there, do this, pick that up, bend down. They know all those words, but they don't know any of the emotional words. This is frustrating. This must be difficult. This must be really make you mad. Or we made a dictionary, that very small dictionary that gives them all the emotional terms in a variety of definitions of, anger and frustration and busha, shame, all these other words. My professional language is Hebrew, and all these different words, and the physiotherapists and occupational therapists have this, and now we're able to use it also. Okay, so how do we deal with these children? How do we work with these children? I had the great privilege of studying under both Professor Lieberman and Professor Van Horn, who unfortunately died a few years ago, in a field called CPP, which is Child Parent Psychotherapy. The therapy that they used is attachment-based therapy. Attachment is how the mother-child bond. We're hoping it's a good attachment, a positive attachment. And they worked basically with a population of children who had been suffering and witness to abuse in the family, violent families, so this is how they developed it, and this is how we adapted it to the medical stuff. They're saying that healthy development is built on the foundation of parental protection, which gives the child the security and the safety to explore and to develop. And the attachment that forms between the mother and the child is the emotional bond that promotes the survival through the child's reliance on the adult for protection. Now, the question is, what happens when there's trauma? And the question is always here also, the parents are considered, when the attachment is good, as a positive attachment, their parents are considered a secure base for the child to explore the world. If we think about it, often we see the 1.5-year-olds who are just beginning to walk, who walk away from the parents, turn around, look back and go, "Oh, they're still there. It's okay. I can continue exploring." Or they come walking back and they say, "Oh, hi," get a hug, and then they continue doing this. That is a secure base. I can see my world. I can explore my world from this secure base. A child who has experienced trauma, 95%, 99% of the time, the parents has experienced trauma too. The question is, if for taking an example of a car accident, was the parent hurt? Was the parent in the accident himself? Was the child in a car seat like he was supposed to be in? What is the effect of all of this on the parent and on the child? Is the parent so unsettled that the base that the child is looking for is secure or not? I met a family about a year ago who a week and a half after the child had surgery for a growth on her spine, were already at ALYN because thank God it wasn't cancerous. So it was a very, very quick thing. They came to the ER, and within a day and a half, the child was in surgery semi out of the blue. And the parents were still trying to deal with what happened. And they were not able to provide the secure base for their child at that point. So a lot of the work was also helping the parents provide the secure base. And sort of get reorganized themselves, realigned to be able to provide for their child. And the problem is also that we're talking sometimes the trauma the child has suffered, often the parent has been injured. It also touches on former traumas that the parents have had, if they've been in accidents before and if they've had traumatic experiences. And the base that we want to be a secure base, which can help the child deal with his trauma, often turns into an insecure, non-supportive, unpredictable, and even frightening and threatening base. And often the parents are unwilling or unable or reluctant to talk to the child about what happened. I wanted to stop for 1 second, especially to Joanne. If there are comments, please, I'm very willing to, I much prefer discussing things if there's any comments.
I went on mute, sorry. Sure, there are a couple of questions. One is, do you sometimes feel the parent has a harder time learning to deal with the child's trauma than the child?
Yeah, the children, because they are children and they live in the here and now more, and their memories are also different. They deal with it in a better way. I've got kids who I've worked with who are in wheelchair, we're walking and are now in wheelchairs, who are now using crutches, who need splints. And you talk to them about, where you were 6 months ago, and sometimes they don't remember, in a verbal sense, where they were. And as long as they're functioning at this point, one of the children just was released from the hospital, who's running around like very, very quickly with crutches and splints, and she's doing fine. So her experience is, okay, I'm back up and around and I'm mobile. And, I was more, we might say I was more mobile before, but she's dealing with, okay, this is, she can do most of what she used to be able to do. Her parents are, dealing with a child. Okay, how do I deal with a child being disabled?
Yeah, and I guess, yeah, sorry.
I have to just say this one thing about this mother. She, part of the work I had done with her was on how she asked me, I'm going to take my child home who's disabled, right? She's going to stay disabled.
Oh, yeah.
And we had many discussions about that. And in our last session together, we were talking about going on a bus, which I had sent her to do, just to get the experience. And she goes, well, I got on the bus in Purim with my daughter and my son, and nobody was giving me room. And she goes, and I yelled at everybody, I have a disabled child, would you please give me room? And I started laughing and I go, I created a monster.
Yeah.
But this is the mother who 3 months earlier was like devastated. And how am I going to deal with this in the community?
Yes, and I guess that goes into also, as adults, we understand what an impact will be lifelong. As a child, they're not thinking of that. They're just
Right.
dealing with day to day. This is my reality today. They can't think, I'm going to be like this 20 years from now.
Right. I always tell the parents when they leave that the child is going to need more therapy in the future. When their thought process changes, when they stop being concrete, when they become in abstract thinking when they start having to deal with the teenage years and, how am I going to find a partner?
Yes.
What is this going to affect? How's it going to affect me? When you're talking about your self-image, and, how do I integrate the self-image? I'm burned, I have crutches. How am I going to do that into a teenager whose self-image is, major issue? So we know for maybe at this point in time, the child is functioning well and doing well in, age appropriate. They will need more interventions in the future. That's for sure.
Right. And someone here said when they visited the hospital, they heard the expression of needing to help the parents create a new narrative for their child. And they thought that was a good way to explain what you're speaking about.
That's actually the next slide.
Oh, okay. So someone must be have ESP or saw your slide deck ahead of time. But if another question, since you said you're happy to take questions in the middle. Sometimes I imagine the parent feels guilty. Because some things are accidents just happen. You're walking across the street, you get hit by a car. But sometimes the parent will know that maybe they stopped watching the child or were driving carelessly or something. So I imagine you have to deal with parents who have guilt about what happened to their child. And then it must be hard for them to relate to their children as well.
We do deal with it. Because of the number of children we're dealing with, we do not deal directly with the parents. The parents will need the help, their own therapy outside of ALYN. I occasionally did study EMDR, which is a therapy that's very good for adult and child trauma. And I often give like first aid just to get the parents a little bit more, collected. But it's something that the parents have to deal with, their own traumas outside, and they often aren't interested in it during the rehab process. They'll say, okay, go to the parent, go to take care of my child first. I'll take care of myself later.
Got it.
And sometimes it's right, and sometimes it's the question of how much resources each parent has and how much their energy levels are. It really is, it's dependent on that. You actually were saying, I just wrote down before we started. I was working in one of the therapy sessions. I was working with a child who had a tracheostomy, which means she was breathing through a tube in her throat. And she had been removed. And in the playroom, she was taking the doll with the tracheostomy and she was suctioning it. And she was expressing the fear that it was clogged. And this is something that I knew she had suffered with a number of times because her trach had gotten clogged a couple of times. And it's a frightening experience. And her mother looked at me, she goes, I can't deal with this. And the kid was she had her own suction machine there and she was suctioning and she was doing great with the doll. And I was supporting the child, and I was also supporting the mother in that situation because she couldn't deal with it. And actually that was the beginning when I took her for a couple of EMDR sessions.
Got it.
I also had this burn child who suddenly, when he went back home, started talking about the bonfire that he was injured in, that he was burned from. And we spent a couple of sessions drawing it and using finger paints and gouache to reenact the fire. And his father was hysterical. I mean, his father was, does he really have to do this? And I go, yeah, he really needs to do this. And this kid was involved in, the page became the entire table. But I had to calm the father down to help him understand that this child needs to be able to do this.
And control it. And that way he was able to control his own narrative, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I want to say one word about feeling blame. When somebody speaks about himself and blames himself, you can Also, you don't have to dig the reason. Why do you feel blame? You can say or share with him the feeling that his feeling of blame show that he's very concerned and he's very loving. And with this, you can do more now and at the future.
Right. So you turn it around. You say, take that fear or concern, turn it
It's
into
an evidence
helping.
that how
Right.
the child is so important for you. And
Right.
now what we will do from now with this feeling.
Right. Okay. Those
Okay,
are the questions for now.
okay. So one of the concepts, one of the major concepts of CPP is speaking the trauma or speaking the unspeakable. And this is the importance of building an age-appropriate trauma narrative. Children don't forget. They may have difficulty understanding and organizing the information, but they don't forget. And parents really don't always know how to explain it or don't want to talk to about what happened. And the kids need the basic information so they can process what happened. Generally, my favorite question when I meet the parents for the first and second time is, okay, what does the child know? Because we have to know where to start with, what he does know, what he doesn't know. And one of my favorite answers is he knows everything. That's one of the answers I never believe, because I've never found a child to know everything. I've got just some examples of things that I've, over the years, we had a child with cancer in her leg, and she had surgery on her belly. And the kid was old enough to understand that her leg and her belly aren't connected.
Yeah.
And nobody explained to her basically that she had fertility preservation because she was going to have chemo. And they took part of her ovary so she could have, she could become, have babies later in her life. And nobody explained this to her. And she ended up having a complication in the surgery. So it made it even more of an issue. But this child knew everything, but not that. And that was an issue. It was a cloud that was hanging over there. 2 weeks ago, I met a mother with a child with leukemia. And I started asking her what he knows. And she goes, he knows everything. And she's continuing talking to me, and she's calling it in English, the big C. In Hebrew, it's called the illness.
Right.
And she keeps saying the big C, the big C, the big C. And I looked at her and I go, I'm trying to understand. You're talking about the big C. You're not using the word leukemia. You're not using the word cancer. What does he call it? What have you talked to him about it? That he doesn't know. I later talked to the father who was with him in the hospital, and he explained to me that he may have known the word leukemia, but they explained to him, and beautifully, that something in his blood got mixed up, which is a perfectly legitimate, and I have no problem. The kid doesn't have to know exactly, you've got this type of growth in this place, and half the medical terms I don't understand and know. But they need an age-appropriate explanation. Growths are often like marbles that are in the wrong place, that aren't supposed to be there, and they had to take the marble out. Which is perfectly fine, but they have to know there's surgery. They have to know that something was taken out, something's changed. I also, one of my favorite stories is of a child who was another child with a burn case, who first of all, the father described his burns as boo-boos. And I have to say, it's very interesting because in English, there's boo-boos. In Arabic, it's wawas. In Hebrew, there's no equivalent term.
Oh.
And this child was Arab, and the father was talking about boo-boos because the father was burnt, the mother had burns, the child had burns, but they talked all about boo-boos. And he told me, well, he's going to forget. He's not going to remember. And I'm going, he's going to look at his arm and remember. He's going to see the scars. I mean, it's in his face. And we talked about it. And he also lost his sister in the in this fire. And nobody was talking to him about his sister or what happened. And this is the father's going, oh, he's going to forget. He hasn't asked about her. And I go, okay, because nobody's talked about it. He's already realized that you don't ask the question. I later talked to the mom, and she was saying, I'm not letting him play on the cell phone because there are pictures of his sister there. And I go, that's really one of the most natural ways for him to bring up the issue. Let him play with the phone. Let him see a picture of his sister. And if you can, and I gave her some counseling, how to talk to him about it. And she was able, when he looked at it, she was able to deal with it and tell him what happened. But this is, he's going to forget everything. One of the other children was an ex-preemie, a 6-year-old preemie who came into my office. And preemies usually are tiny little kids with narrow little faces. Well, this was a little monster of a kid. I mean, he was, looked like an 8-year-old with a big fat face, absolutely adorable, bright little kid with leg splints. And I looked at the mother and we're talking, and she's saying, well, I told him that, his leg splints, that his dad had them also when he was a kid. And I'm like, what? I mean, why doesn't he have his leg splints now? I mean, leg splints is something he's going to have to deal with most of his life. And we started talking. I did not do therapy with the kid. I saw the mom instead. And we started talking about him being a preemie, and she's never told him about it. She has wiped out all the pictures from the neonatal unit, so she can't even show him a picture. And through the counseling that I gave her, she was able to talk to him about it. And he goes, oh, okay. That was the end of it. I mean, it was not an issue for him. And I sort of said, okay, you were telling me that his brother has glasses. How about relating, your brother needs glasses, you need splints. Everybody has their rehab, things that they need, the equipment that they need. These are my rehab equipment. Maureen, the head of the hospital, always goes, Estee, where are your glasses? You need your rehab things. I can't read anything without them.
Well, I have mine on also, right?
Right. Well, I have 2 pairs sitting here. And I have the paper I'm reading from is in big print.
Yes.
So we all have our rehab equipment, and she was able to deal with the fact that he's wearing splints, and that's perfectly okay because he needs it for his legs. And he was a preemie, and she explained to him what a preemie was. And he's a delightful 9 or 10-year-old today. I see him running around occasionally. He comes back for things. So these are the idea of building the trauma narrative. I have to deal with the parents first. Okay, in what language are we going to speak it? How are we going to describe it? We have to use cultural appropriate terms. For an example, the Haredi population does not talk about urine and pee and kaki, or whatever it's called in English today, pee and poo. And it's called big ones and little ones, gdolim viktanim. So you have to use the proper language for it. We have to describe what they do want to say, what they don't want to say, and I respect parents, what they decide, how far do we go and what do we explain to them. And here's how we start the therapy. This is CPP in action. This is a picture I took of one of the children's working with the Playmobil Hospital, which is one of our most used toy in the playroom. I mean, I think this is our 2nd or 3rd hospital because we just use so much. That and medical equipment. I come in the playroom is the parent, the child, and the therapist. I start off the therapy session telling the child what I know about what happened to him, which has been approved by the parent. You were hit by a car, you were sick, they removed the gula from your head, from your back. And we're here to help you because things have changed and it's difficult, and we're here to help you. And we focus, and then the child is free. Generally, the child does not respond Okay, it's there, okay, but it's out there and gives me the ability in the continuing sessions to relate to what I know to his play. You know, oh wow, that must be scary to be on the bed with the surgeons. That must be scary, you know. That's like what you had happen to you when, you know, the doctors took out the gula from your back. The gula is the marble. So we can talk about it. The child is given a free range what to play with. It can be with the hospital, it can be with the medical equipment, it can be totally not what they want to play with. And we've got kids who play, we've got an entire range of things in the playroom. It can be with paint, it can be with other toys, it can be with animals, it can be with books, blocks, whatever. And the idea here is the therapist translates both the child's behavior to the parent. You can explain why the child is suddenly whining or crying or disassociated for a minute, and explain it on a developmental and emotional level. And also you have the parents' reactions that you have to explain to the child. I had a child who was run over by a car. The mother had witnessed it and the child was reenacting it. And the mother burst into tears. And so I had to go and comfort the mom. And basically I said, you know, I think the two of you need to hug each other right now. You know, mom is really having a hard time. She saw it and it's really difficult for her to see you reenacting it. And she's really here for you. Now I have to say, this is also a mother with complex trauma herself. The child also, the mother had been in a very violent car accident. Actually, her father tried to kill his family in this car accident and she survived. And this she did, it was as a child. So she's dealing with this. And both the mother and the child witnessed when the father was taken to jail about 4 months before the accident. So you're dealing with a very complex, you know, the mother's reacting. So you're trying to make the base secure again for both the parent and the child. Okay, and I also say for me, having the parent in the room also provides a lot of information. I had a child come in the first time and he immediately started reenacting the accident he was in. And I was like, okay, and I honestly couldn't quite figure out what was going on. I mean, I was watching everything and the mom's going to me, he's reenacting it. She's giving me the information. She knows what the child has been through. She knows what he's been through in the hospitals, what she's been through in other places. And they're a great source of information that I can help, you know, help them process what they've been through. It's also a place where the parent can come in and say, you know, this last week, this and this happened. And they can bring up what the child has experienced, what they've experienced, and we can work on it from there. A lot of the sentences I use towards the kid during the therapy is reflecting their frustration, their anger, their jealousy of things that they used to be really easy for them. You used to be able to walk and, you know, go from you used to be able to get up and walk and sit down easily without any help. And now you need help on all these things. They also get a lot of credit for all the things that they've achieved. Wow, you really have done so much work in physiotherapy now that you go from your wheelchair to our chair, you know, so easily now. That's great, you know. But you also get the jealousy of, let's say, a younger brother or sister who's suddenly starting to walk and they're not walking. And they're not, how they get back to walking. For the child, the therapy facilitates a symbolic play that assists in building and processing the narrative. For the parent, it helps the child to get the parent back to be the support the child needs, and also help them during understanding what the child is going through. And the joint therapy enables the cooperative, active, and ongoing building of a trauma narrative in an interactive process that is formed between the child and the parent and the therapist. Time-wise, I have like 2 vignettes I'd like to share if that works, Joanne.
Sure.
Okay. First of all, I owe you the question of when are we going to return the wheelchair, where that came from. So I'm going to start with Tali. If I have time, we'll do Ali. So Tali was a 4.5-year-old child of a regular, well-developed child, the oldest of two, who was in a car accident. Now I need my glasses. The little brother broke his leg, the mom broke her ankle, and Tali ended up having a spinal cord injury that left her paralyzed from the middle of her back down. When I first, and she was at the beginning, when I first met her, she was breathing through a cannula and the tracheostomy, and she was only able to make voices, but she was not able to make a voice and to talk, but she was able to make, she spoke with, through her lips only. She was also wearing a halo, which is a sort of a Frankenstein type of equipment that is screwed into the skull and held on into the chest, and it's basically to keep the cervical vertebrae and the neck stable, because there was some breakage there, and this is, so you can't put a cast on it. So this is how it is, and so she's in this thing, and it really is Frankenstein looking like. And this is when I first met her. The family at that point, this is pre-corona, was living in the hospital. We had a place where they were able to live, the parents and the younger brother. And they had learned how to suction Tali, so they were able to take her out of the unit and bring her also to the playroom and also to their room. Adorable little 4-year-old, big brown eyes. I'm told, I talk to the parents, and they tell me that she's a very bright and independent little child, and that she had been, excuse me, I'm going in Hebrew and English. She was toilet trained easily, and now because of the spinal cord injury, she is cannot be trained again. She is going to have to be she's lost the control of her sphincters, and she's going to have to be catheterized the rest of her life. We talk about what she knows. The family is very, very open to discussing things and talking to Tali about what's going on. I watched Tali in a couple of therapy sessions so I can know her and see what's going on. I see her desire for control, and she is adamant that she wants to talk, though she can only talk with her lips. On the other hand, I see that her affect is very, very flat, and she's depressed. And at one point, I see her eating a cookie, and I'm very, very happy that she was able to eat a cookie on her own. And she's sort of half smiling at the mother when she's doing this. I bring her into the playroom the first time. I spoke the trauma. I told her that I'm sure she's angry and she's mad and she's scared and she's frustrated, and she doesn't answer, and her mood is very negative, and even on the point of being aggressive. I started showing her around the playroom, what there's available to her, and she wants to go back to her parents' room. She doesn't want to be there. And since one of my goals is to give her support and to give her the control that she wants, I go, sure, you can, go back to your room. But I go, let me show you a couple more things that are in the room. Surprisingly, she agreed. I think here the fact that she was allowed to choose and she was given the choice gave her the ability to sit there and say, okay, I'll come and see what, I'm willing to do what you want, to see the other thing. And you could see her face being, wow, okay, this is a little different. And you could, her natural curiosity was able to come through. After a couple minutes, I let her go back to her room. And then I sat there and I thought, how do I get this child to help her become the sweet and darling child she was before, and not sort of a monster that she's become at this point, being so, she's aggressive, she's not pleasant, she's difficult to work with. And she was considered an adorable little kid before. The next time Tali comes into the room, she wants to play. And she has this great imaginary play ability. And then she asks suddenly her mom for a piece of gum, which she's not allowed to have. And I didn't let her have it. And I explained to her how frustrating this must be for her. And I sort of gave her what, then she wants to leave again. I go, please, you're welcome to leave, giving her again the control. In the next couple of meetings that we have, she never, this is a child who never played out the trauma, never, ever in the whole time. She plays regressively, she paints, she uses chalks, she plays with water, but she never goes toward the to the trauma. She goes to other games. But she starts playing in the continuing, starts playing with a doll who also has a cannula and a tracheostomy. And she, in the same time, also needed suctions herself. And I talked to her about how scary it must be, and it's not comfortable, and how must be when you've got the feeling that you're gonna that you can't breathe. And she says under her breath, I want to throw out the cannula. And I go, yeah, I'm sure you do. Probably the wheelchair too. And she goes, yeah. So we talk about it. We're continuing the therapy. Her mood swings from anger to happiness, but the major thing is control. Who's going to be with her? Who's going to catheterize her? And she continues. She makes soup out of the paints, and she plays with the catheters. She makes a bunch of flowers out of the different colored catheters that are in the room. But she's also beginning to be interested in some of the stories that I read to her, some of the therapeutic stories like Elmo, the colorful elephant. And one of my favorite stories is Alexander the Horrible, Terrible, No Good, Very Bad Day, which is one of my favorites. We've translated it into Hebrew, and I use it a lot. One of the therapy sessions, she tells me that they're taking out the cannula, and she is thrilled. I mean, the mother and she are thrilled, and you can see it. And I sit there and I go, oh, I'm so happy. And then under my breath, I say to the mother, sometimes it doesn't work the first time. Unfortunately, I hope I didn't jinx them. It didn't work. And actually, she was very happy to get it back because she was really having a difficult time breathing. Later, the cannula was removed, and the halo was removed, and she was able to move on to also to she left the different units, and was able to also go home ambulatory. We're talking about the change to the ambulatory care, and this is when it comes up. When are we going to return the wheelchair? She goes home and she goes, when are we going to give her the wheelchair back? I'm fine. I'm better. I can go home. I want to get rid of the wheelchair. And it's helping her deal with the fact now that no, she's not going to give up the wheelchair. She's going to need this for the rest of her life. In the big picture, we also, when she becomes an ambulatory care, she starts going to kindergarten, and we do work with the kindergarten. With this, we prepare the staff, we help prepare the children for her returning to the kindergarten with a wheelchair and with a helper. it's interesting that right when she went home, she started playing also with the house, and how the house is, it's a whole new thing of how to return home with a child in a wheelchair who needs all of the help. And I think one of the funniest things was also that she kept putting her father in, and her father had a tendency to fall asleep in all different places. He'd come to therapy, he'd fall asleep. He'd go, we didn't talk, he'd be falling asleep. He fell asleep a lot in the house, in the playhouse also. I have to say this is an old thing that I wrote about, but we're talking about this is during the military action of Tzuk Eitan in the summer, when in one of the actions in Gaza, and everybody is, it's more, there's a lot of tension in the hospital. We have children, we have husbands in the army. We have a very varied population because we have children, Palestinian children. We also had a child from Gaza, and actually this child and mother, Tali and her mom, were able to talk to the Palestinian child who was a couple months behind Tali in her rehab, and was able to explain what they went through and what they did. And I said, this is the beauty of ALYN. It's a religious family, Tali and her family, but these were all children and families who are dealing with the same thing. And they were able to help each other. Just looking at the time, and I'm seeing what I'd like to say about Tali is I saw Tali about 3 weeks ago. She's now 14 years old. She's in a regular education. Her mom said that she is the star student in her grade. She's part of the youth movement. She goes in her electric wheelchair to the youth movement. She's integrated into everyday life for age appropriate. She looks happy. She looked good. She was able to already, I'm going backwards for a minute. They had in the kindergarten, they had a discussion about road safety, and she was able to tell the children there about her accident, what happened to her, why she's in a wheelchair, and which is just, I think, is the essence of, she was able to speak the trauma. She was able to bring out what she had gone through and what she had processed with her parents, and to tell other people about it.
Well, I think there are a couple of questions. I can see how passionate you are, and you probably speak a lot longer, and I personally would love to hear it, but I'm getting the sense that we're coming to the end of the hour here. So I was going to ask, because Ruth mentioned this at the beginning when she was speaking, after 20 years and you see all of the horrible things or tragic things that happen to people, how do you get yourselves up and excited and able to deal? But I could see that in your last comments on Tali, that these success stories just drive you forward. But maybe if that's not the answer, maybe you could speak a little bit more on that.
Seeing the children, I about a month ago got a picture from a family that I had worked with over the summer. They sent me for a child's 3rd birthday party, and I said, oh, thank you for remembering me. You know, he looks great. And they go, you're so important to us from with this. You really helped us through this really difficult time. This is what helps me. Also knowing that when I see the new families, that I know I can help them. I've seen a lot of the situations. I know where they can get to.
Right.
And I know that I can help them get there.
Right.
That's what helps me. Ruthie, from your experience?
I think that when you feel meaningful, this is the reason.
Yeah.
When you feel that you can help somebody. Or even another thing, in ALYN, we have many fields that we can work at. It's with the children, with the parents, with other plans for the whole hospital. We can do many things and we feel meaningful. And this is the reason that we stay there. And also, as we started, some of us go with each other for a long time. So we have the place or the ability to speak with each other. to come one day and to say this was very hard for me. And this is also very important that we have each other.
Right, that you can talk about it, your own therapy within your own groups. Yes.
I've walked into Ruthie's office numerous times. I got to talk to you. I got to tell you what just happened, what I just met, for good and for bad.
Yes.
Um,
And then someone said, when a child comes from acute care at a different hospital, do they understand why they're coming to ALYN?
that's what we're working on to help them understand it. The parents don't always know how to explain it. The staff, we've worked with the staff, they try to explain it. It's a matter of trying to put it in terms that the child can understand.
Right.
Some of them don't know that they will be in ALYN for a long time, and it's a surprise. And this also can give them a feeling that it's not over, and to be depressed by this effect. And this is one of the first things that we have to deal with, explain why are they here, what are their purpose. If they are involved, it will be more successful.
Right. And along, yes, sorry.
I think also that the fact that, especially if the kid is hospitalized and he sees other children, he's in a milieu that's he's not unusual. He's not the out of sorts child. He's one of this. This is his milieu. Okay, we're all here in the same boat. You got different things, but we have this group that we can be with, and kids often will deal with each other. We often have we've run groups, and I mean, I've done it a couple of times, and I've had kids who are on the same unit who never really talked to each other and shared what happened to them. Two kids were in car accidents. Oh, this is what happened to you. This is what happened to me. And it helps them that they're not alone. They're not the only ones.
Right. And along with that, you mentioned how it's so important for you to help the parent explain to the child at age appropriateness what has happened to them. But what if the parent can't speak to the child? Does the parent allow you to discuss separately with the child?
I never do it separately. The parent can be there. And after we've discussed it and the parent said, I can't do it, I will help them. And I will try to draw the parent into the conversation. Generally, once it's out in the open, the parent will come in and say, yes, it really scared me in the hospital here. Some comment that the parent can add in, but I will never do it with the parent.
Okay.
Often we'll try, if maybe the father can do it, the mother can do it, who's better. And we'll try, but it's always the parent-child unit, the dyad.
Okay. All right. I see someone has said this has been so informative. Thank you for the wonderful thank you to the wonderful presenters. I echo that. Looking to see if there are any other questions. I'll give it a moment. Sometimes I speak too fast, and just as I'm closing the session, somebody jumps in with a question. But I don't see any. So I'd like to echo that and say I found this very informative, very interesting, and very fascinating. And I think you both are terrific presenters. So as I said, I could go on forever listening because this is fascinating. So thank you both. I would like to, yes, sorry.
You're welcome.
Okay, toda rabah. I would like to mention again that we'll be distributing a video of this presentation to all of you, and even the people who signed up and weren't able to show up today. So this will be on our website. You can share it with friends and family and look for our next Align with ALYN, probably in 6 to 8 weeks time. We're looking around to get our next topic. Maureen just said, am I the luckiest with my team or what? So I want to say, yes, Marie, you are very lucky. I'm so impressed. I can't even tell you. And I'm sure the other people who are on silent, so they're on mute, feel the same. So thank you, Marie, for that. That made me smile. So we will be distributing this. Please share it with friends and family. And this will, as I mentioned, we have all the other series here. There's so much that everyone can learn about ALYN by looking at the previous videos as well. So this is up on the webpage. It's on YouTube, as I mentioned. And I want to remind everyone that it is our support, their success. Thanks very much. Enjoy the day or the evening. Thanks again. It was a pleasure meeting you.